So this is a tutorial to explain the basics of using an online service called InsertLearning. InsertLearning is intended to be used by educators and students as a way to, I would describe as add elements to online web pages. And so the idea, particularly as used by an educator, would be to prepare an online resource as a learning activity for students. So you start with something that's already there. And what I'm using as a demonstration here is simply a blog post that I have available that I made. And you add elements to this online existing resource in order to help the learner, to guide the learner, to get the learner to think in particular ways, to notice certain things. So I'll go through exactly how this is accomplished. Now, this is a paid service, or you can actually try it for free, but you get quite a bit for your money, and it's not just something to offer one resource, but it's a way to organize multiple resources within a dashboard so that the educator can prepare these lessons ahead of time, assign them to classes consisted of a designated group of students, have the students, in some cases, respond to questions within the lesson, and then review, and I guess if you want, grade the responses offered by the students. So it's really kind of a complete package in terms of making use of online web pages. So I'm starting here looking at this web blog post entry, and what I'm going to do is add some elements to it using InsertLearning. And InsertLearning, when used in this way, is an extension. So if you look up at the top here on my many extensions, you'll see this little IL here. This is the icon that will activate InsertLearning, the extension that I've added to my Chrome browser here, InsertLearning. So I click this, and you'll see what it's doing is activating the extension, which adds these tools that you see along the left-hand border here. And quickly I'll go through them. I'll show you a couple of them, but I'll go through and explain them all. You have the pencil, as you can see, which is a highlighting tool. So as the educator, I might highlight something I want students to see. The student also, by the way, can use this personally to highlight, just as you or I might highlight things in a textbook we read. So it's not just a tool for the teacher, although I'm kind of presenting it from that perspective. The second icon allows the insertion of a note. So if you want to just make a comment, if you want to introduce something, maybe you would want to reference another source that the learner might want to look at. You would do that by adding a note to this existing page. Here we have the icon for inserting a question. Now, educators, of course, make heavy use of questions, and you can add an open-ended question to which the learner can add a response. And as I said before, you as the teacher could end up reviewing this response using the dashboard that I'll show you eventually. Or it can be a multiple choice question, however you want to approach it. And finally, you have this tool here, which basically offers the opportunity to not just one student, but to multiple students to have a discussion. So if there's something that's brought up in the content that makes a case for something and you want students to talk about this, you insert the header, the key that guides the instruction, and then as students encounter that, they can add their own comment and see what other students, how they would respond to the same guiding request. So I'll quickly go through and demonstrate a couple of these. They all kind of work in the same way. So anyway, let's say I scroll down a bit and I see something here that I'm trying to make a couple key points, and that might be something I would want to highlight. So like I said, I go to the highlight tool, I activate it, and as you often do, you then highlight text, and so now you have something that's highlighted. This little icon that showed up, if I click on this again, you can see I can get rid of that if I change my mind. Quickly show you the question tool and how you place it. Let's say I'm looking through this and I see a reference to something called Bloom's Two Sigma Challenge, which is basically Bloom's idea that educational aids, techniques used to guide study perhaps, the best they could do or how they might think about their effectiveness would be to compare it to the role of a tutor. And the tutor, through all kinds of research, shows that it can augment student performance. And so whatever else we do, how close can these techniques come to approximating the benefits of a tutor? So let's say I'm interested in whether the people who read this, the students who read this, understand this concept. So I'm going to insert a question, select the question icon, click on the segment, and you see I've now added a stem here for a question. This presently exists now as an open-ended question, not a multiple choice question. I could switch that over to a multiple choice question. But let's leave it here because I don't want to take the time to try to think up a good multiple choice question. I'll just write something quick. What what does Bloom assume is the ideal against which study aids can be compared? Why is this the ideal? And so now that it's added, and you can see what would happen is when the student encounters this, they would now offer a response. So I can go through this individual lesson or just annotation of this single blog post. When I'm finished, I come up here, and at this point, I can assign this. Now, what I like to do is, to begin this entire process by identifying or creating a class, which I'll show you how to do in just a second. Assign students to the class, and then once that's done, what I can do when I click this is I can select the particular class. It'll bring up the options. And I've used this in a couple of classes. On the graduate level I teach, and you can see here I would select one of the existing classes to assign it to. That's pretty much how it's done. If I just want to use it as an individual page, I can get a link for this individual page, and of course I could send that out to someone I wanted to look at this. As a student, a couple of things perhaps. You don't pay for InsertLearning, you just add it as an icon. And just like I did in this case to activate it so that I could annotate this page, the student would do the same thing. They would activate the icon in the extension, and if they were enrolled in a class that had been assigned to view this page and respond to these annotations or use these annotations, they would see them. If a student would do that on their own, they simply then could get these same tools, or actually they get a subset of these tools as a designated student, but they could add annotations and highlights, not questions or discussion tools. So that's pretty much the process. Very simple. That's the point. It's easy to use, easy to set up, and I think that's the point, right? We want tools that have plenty of opportunities for use so that the learning curve is worth investing in. It's not much of a learning curve. I hope, just by watching this, you can understand how you would go about it. Install the extension, right? Create an account, and away you go. Now let me show you the other side of this, which is described as the dashboard. And the dashboard includes heading for a bunch of different things. Like I said, I would start, and you can see my existing classes and the students I have enrolled in them and how many lessons I have created for these classes. So basically you do this by selecting new class, and then you add the email addresses of students. So when the students create their own version of InsertLearning, they would automatically then connect to this. That's important. You're not really creating something for the entire world. You're limiting the scope by creating classes and assigning students. So that's how classes are created. The other thing I think that's kind of interesting here is the opportunity to review student responses. And you can do this for a variety of reasons. You may not really want to grade them, but you can. I'll show you how that looks. But you also just might want to check on whether they've done it. Maybe you want to provide feedback in various ways. So you click over here to grades. And you, of course, if you're using this heavily, you're going to have multiple classes. You're going to have multiple lessons within the class. Maybe you have multiple questions assigned to a very long page, and you can use these headings up here to select. So I actually what I've done is just find a particular lesson that has a couple of questions, and this is what you see now. You get students responding. A couple of students from my grad class. I'm not going to show you them, but that's what the response comes in. I can grade it if I want to. The default is 10 points. You can mess with that if you want. I'm not really grading these, but what I tend to do then is write a quick response. So the student knows that I've read it, and maybe if I spotted something I think is interesting or flawed, that I can respond to. So again, that's a quick overview, enough I hope to encourage maybe you're taking a look. It's called InsertLearning. You can try it for free. If you want to use it extensively, the cost, if you want to do it by the month, is $8. You can also do it for longer periods at what then becomes a reduced rate. And to some extent, I found that if I teach for a semester, which is I'm a college instructor, it's actually cheaper for me to buy the longer period of time rather than pay $8 even a month for one semester. Very reasonable price, I think, given that it can be used quite extensively. And again, I think that's an important thing in the tools that we look to invest our time and our students' time in. Can we make a reasonable amount of use of it to be worth the time to learn the tool and also to pay for whatever the tool costs? So that's InsertLearning, and I hope I've convinced you to take a look.